Teresa, just so you know, we're up to 18 now.
Yeah, that's great. So is all right for everybody if we start? Yeah, we are.
Yep.
Okay. So, okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Teresa, and I am the project lead of the Space Investment Program. Thank you all for joining today. I would like to welcome you to our second webinar for the Space Investment Program. This webinar is about the top reasons for the investment, the team, top reasons for failure, the team, by Paul Gillespie from Gilmore Stevens. Gilmore Stevens is a specialized executive recruitment company and one of our digital partners at TechTool. And Paul is also part of our selection committee evaluating the companies of this program. But I'm quite sure Paul will explain much better in a few minutes. Okay. As you already know, this webinar is part of our investment readiness process that we invite you all to be part of. I would like to remind you to register for the coming webinar, How to Prepare Your Investor Pitch by Mark Wilson from Strategic Technology Bio Consulting. And this will be the last webinar that will happen next week on Thursday, 26th at 4 p.m. Central European Time. You can find the link to register, I think, right now into the chat. And also, as part of the investment readiness, the selected companies will attend the Academy's demo days on the 8th and 9th of December. And the e-pitching sessions will happen on the 15th and 16th of December. Before starting with the webinar, I would like to share a few housekeeping rules for making the session as smooth as possible. Please be aware that we are recording the session. And if any of you is not okay with that, please write me a message. It can be also in the chat, and we will remove you from the recording. Please rename yourself with your name, your surname, and your company name. And even on these times, it's always preferred to see you all. So we ask you to turn on your camera. And for a better communication, we kindly ask you to turn off your microphone and to use the chat functionality all the time during the session. We ask you to write your questions down, and Paul will open Q&A questions time, so then you can ask louder your questions. Remember that the chat will be always active, and you can direct questions to Paul, to Youssef, to myself, or any of the TechTool team that is at the session. And with all this information said, I will not take more time to introduce you to Paul Gillespie and his really interesting presentation, and hoping that you enjoy it. Thank you, and Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Teresa. Good afternoon, everyone. I can only do one thing at a time, so let's make sure I'm correctly sharing. Okay, Teresa, can you confirm?
Yes, we see perfectly. Thank you, Paul.
Excellent. Okay,
yes, everything
great.
is fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you all for attending. As Teresa said, I'm Paul Gillespie. I work with a company called Gilmore Stevens. We are a recruitment company. We focus on executive search, but behind all of that, I'm a founder of two companies. I'm an engineer, electronics engineer by background, and who doesn't love space? So we're working with we'll talk about some of the work that we're doing, but the reason I do what I do is I love working with startups, and I love working with technology companies, and space is probably the most exciting thing going on out there at the moment. So it's great to see so many companies signing up for the TechTour Academy and actually taking part in this. So welcome, and also, best of luck and best wishes for your businesses as you move forward as well. So today, the top reason for investment, top reason for failure, that got your attention, didn't it? And that was kind of the key rationale of doing this. People are probably one of the well, they are the one of the top three reasons for success and failure in organizations. But the number one thing at the front of your minds is always the technology and the funding. But the people will make or break your ability to go from, as we would say, the back of the cigarette packet idea through to something that can actually truly become a viable product for scaling. So so today, what we're going to do is we are going to talk about a number of different subject areas around people and your businesses. And particularly, all of this is focused on early stage businesses, which is where we probably do 70% of our work. And again, I'll come back to that in a moment. And look, as you can see on there, Miko Sunalati, he's a Finn serial investor, board member, and he was on an Invest Horizon Academy with myself talking about investment, and I was on the day after him, and he was just saying, look, we're doing all this time about the investment, but it's the team. It's always about the team. And even if you don't have a great proposition, but the team is great, then you can still get investment into your organization. So the team, the founders, the hires you make are going to be absolutely important. Now, the things I'm going to talk about today, some of it may be immediately relevant, some of it may be relevant for the future, some of it may not be relevant at all, but hopefully there will be things that you can take from this that will help you on your journey. And as I've said in that second to last bullet point, hiring and retention mistakes can kill a company, but at the very least, it's going to cost you. Because if you think about the process of hiring a VP into the company, the time it takes, the cost of doing it, and then the cost of them leaving and the hole it leaves in your business, this is why people hiring and retention should always be at the forefront of your mind. Now, and again, the last thing I would ask is, we'll talk about different subjects and then we'll stop. You can either put questions in the chat or just speak out through your microphone. But the more interactive we make this, the more real it'll become for you guys and your businesses. So, please do be interactive as we go through the discussion. So, first of all, I don't actually look like that. It was a very bright light, and I look much better in the shadows of home working. And as you can see, this is the days where people had to wear shirts, and people don't wear shirts anymore. They just wear jumpers. So, but it makes me look very corporate. But just to explain who you've got in the room here. So electronic engineer, I was in telecoms, oil and gas, did my personal pivot in terms of being attracted into a recruitment company. I then joined a startup as one of the first three. We built it to 80. We sold it to one of the public search companies. As I said there, horror show, that's a discussion over a beer. We left and set up Gilmore Stevens, and 20 years later, we've gone through the roller coaster of tech recessions, and we may be on the verge of another. And then we sold out again to Sheffield Howarth, but very different here. And I'll explain in a moment on that. But what Sheffield Howarth have given us is, one, they've not interfered. Two, they never took our brand away. And three, we're now in Singapore, New York, and Los Angeles, and we have a team of 32. So we've been able to use their business to accelerate our organization's growth and expansion. So as I say, built and sold two businesses. I've been the guy worrying about cash flow and funding. I've also had to worry about IT systems for many, many years, and also been through, obviously, recessions. And I know cash is king, but I also know is, if you need to pivot, and I'll give a good example of that in a moment. So that's me and who we are. We don't need questions on this one because these are just factual things. So Sheffield House, just very quickly, the reason we sold to them was they are an established financial services executive search company serving the banks and the banking world globally. Big big fees, very, very profitable, excellent company because they wanted to diversify. So they loved what we do in terms of working with tech and tech startups. And they were keen to buy us to make them look good because they're a bit, it's banking basically. They just put people into big machines, banking machines. The other thing, and we'll come back to this because it's really important, is we had been for 20 years just a search company. What's the job? We'll go find that person. We'll put them in. We'll make sure they're happy over 3, 6, 12 weeks. But what we've also been introduced to is talent advisory and leadership, planning for hiring. And what do you do to make the best hire? And what do you do to make sure they stay and they're effective in the business? And this has been a massive eye opener for me. I'm an engineer, so I'm very black and white about things, but I've absolutely embraced this and seen the difference it can make to the quality of hire and the effectiveness of hire. So we will come back to that a bit later. So what we basically do, we do the executive search, the consulting, the talent advisory, and this isn't me, this is business psychologists that sit within our talent team. And we're working with everything from universities and research institutions like IMEC and Fraunhofer. So when we're talking about startup, we're talking about the very earliest days of academic teams starting to build businesses. And our work is about industrializing those businesses so that they can enter the world of product, revenue generation, and scale up. But at the other end, we're working for public businesses. We're working with some of the big private equity houses, with companies of thousands of people and 100 million plus revenues across the technology spectrum. So recent work, this is obviously what's going to make us kind of credible with you guys. So the key with all of these companies is they started out from square zero when we got involved in them. But probably the most interesting and relevant company, and to be honest, it's the poster startup in new space, is ISI. You guys hopefully all know them, and they're basically founded by two academics from Aalto University in Finland, Rafal and Pekka. I met them when they literally just got seed funding at an event, and when they said we're going to build ultra low cost satellites that use radar for imaging as opposed to optical cameras, I was like, yeah, let's get another beer. But 9 months later, they'd raised 15 million, and we got involved in putting in their head of global sales. And they launched their first satellite, and it worked, and it stayed up there. They've just launched 2 more on the back of a Soyuz, so they've now got 8 satellites in space, and they're now 200 people, and they've just raised 87 million, and their total funding is now 160 million. And Rafal is just turned 30. He's done nothing but be in academia, and he's absolutely the CEO and the CEO for the future in that business. He's doing an incredible job. And when I mentioned pivoting, the really interesting thing is when we started working with them, they were a satellite business, and it was all about their technology. It was all about small format, low cost, lightweight, but being able to do high resolution radar imaging. 18 months ago, they made a very clear decision that they were actually going to become a data and analytics company that just happens to have its own satellites. Now, it sounds quite subtle, but this was a major, major change for them as a business, because suddenly, rather than selling raw data to third parties, they were actually engaging with governments and corporations, and creating data solutions for those organizations. So we put in the head of sales, we put in the head of manufacturing, we then actually helped them go through this change and hired the heads of analytics, data science, software to build the platform that would interface to their customers. And they're just knocking it out the park. Their revenue growth is far exceeding what was expected. And they're even selling satellite as a service, where governments are saying this is so cheap, we'll buy a satellite for you to build, launch, and manage for us. And that's basically on an annualized payment. And we're talking a lot of money, which is a great addition to their revenue stream. So if there's one company to read up on and understand that bridges the upstream of physical technology in space, right the way through to analytics, data science, and insights, the ISI story is one to look at. And the company's still only 5 years old. You know, it's still early in its journey, but they've hired, I mean, the VP of analytics we brought in from America, she accepted the job, resigned, and that weekend she left her family and flew to Helsinki for 4 weeks. And I hadn't even done the referencing. She was that keen to get started in the company. So that's a bit of background, but Orbex, you can see there, launch a company. We're working with them, and they're about to announce a major funding round, and they're building the launch site up in Scotland for vertical launch, and also at the upstream end, sorry, the downstream end with Planet Watchers. You know, the working with Planet Watchers and putting in a CEO into that early stage analytics company. So we're doing a lot of things: semiconductors, photonics, solar, haptic, electric motors for EV. These are just a very small sample, but space is right at the heart of what we're doing as an organization as well. So some thoughts. This is what we're going to cover. So I thought it would be good because we can give a view of state of the nation, what's happening out there in terms of the startup world. And I think you guys need to hear that because, and it is positive, by the way, because these are difficult times, and it's difficult to be starting a company. I want to talk about being a CEO. You guys are hopefully all the startup CEOs, but the question is, and what we'll talk about is, are you the right person to be CEO when you've done your A round? And I'll go into more detail on that. And I'm not looking for work, but it's something that you guys need to think about and plan for. Understanding what you've got in the room is also another very key element here, and how to actually assess the existing team before you try and hire into your startup team. How do you do that? How do you minimize the risk? How do you work with search companies like us and not get ripped off or make the wrong decisions on the journey of hiring? And really importantly, once you've got them, how do you keep them? And I'll talk about some of the you know, the things that can go wrong when great people are hired into companies, but not in the best way. And then just some other comments. I do a lot of time on juries with Tech Tour and with Invest Horizon, commenting on pitch decks and how companies present themselves. I'm not saying I'm the expert here, but there are some things that you guys have just got to remember when you do your pitches and you create your pitch decks, in terms of presenting them to investors, you know, live, or putting them, you know, on an email and hoping that they get the attention of the investor at the other end. So that should most definitely fill the time that we've got here. So difficult times, maybe even perfect storm. We've got the combination of the pandemic, which is really global. We've got the US presidential election, which is kind of hopefully there, but maybe not quite yet. We've got the whole China-US axis, and this is actually creating major issues. We're working with companies that are trying to establish their operations in America, and what should take 2 weeks to incorporate is taking over 3 months because of the barriers that Trump has put in place. And we are seeing companies that have product that want to work with US government are now having to set up standalone companies with their own boards and their own reporting line to be able to engage with US government. So Trump has just made the US an incredibly hard place to do work and to build out in. But obviously, the China-US axis is really difficult. And for anyone that has to do anything with the UK, and me being trapped in the UK, Brexit looks like everyone's put their foot on the throttle right to the fore, and we're just going to smash into each other. This is Europe and the UK. I don't see a happy outcome for that at the moment. And and there are commentators saying there could well be a recession out there, so or an approaching recession because of the huge increase in unemployment across so many consumer-related sectors. So what we have seen in March with lockdown and everyone suddenly sitting up for the pandemic, it really did turn into 6 months of limbo. People weren't hiring, companies weren't closing funding they expected to close, and literally no one actually understood or acknowledged how things were going to work moving forward. But coming out of that in probably July and then August, it really started to take root. The VCs have got funds and they have to invest them. So we've seen now the transition from funding being closed where people had been met before COVID lockdown to actually now VCs are doing pure virtual funding rounds where they are not physically meeting people because they just can't because of lockdowns and border access. But also they're taking more of a risk, but they're now open to do that because they have to see deal flow and they have to be making investments. And we're seeing it, and we're working with companies that have been through those investments. So the good news for you guys is investors have funds, they've got to deploy them, and they are now actively deploying them, even if it's going to be virtual. And the other good news for us and for you guys is people are joining startups. We've had some really interesting stories. One guy was in France and we were trying to get him to be CEO of a company in Barcelona. He actually used a friend's fruit and vegetable truck to go as a laborer across the border to get into Spain because the border was closed. He helped unload the truck, went and met the board, came back, helped load the truck, and then went back across the border. And not just for doing that, but he got the role as CEO. But now we're seeing pure virtual hiring happening. We are seeing people who are going through a whole load of process. It's all through video, but boards, companies are hiring and they're building their teams. So people are accepting the scenario we're in and just getting on with it. We're also seeing, yes, there's a number of companies being hit by the pandemic, but revenues are growing. ISI, for instance, in terms of in space, Planet Watchers, these guys are in the space sector and they are building a new kind of asset class in terms of data and data insight. And these guys are growing. Their revenues are growing, their customers are growing. So for what you guys are doing in the space sector, there is opportunity, there is market. And we're also seeing companies being bought. One of our long-term clients in semiconductors in Cambridge, they were bought for 450 million by Synaptics in the US. So they had multiple interests. It was all done pretty much through virtual, though the CEO did need to go to America for the final signing and do the 2 weeks quarantine and all of these things. But the machinery of investing, building, and exiting is happening. So my kind of summary to you guys is get your heads down and just get on with it and push forward. We all know that some of the biggest kind of technology company success stories have come out of adversity. And to be honest, let's face it, if someone's told you to go and watch a film where there's a pandemic, there's a mad American president, there's China about to launch missiles on America, and there's a recession, you wouldn't watch that film because you would say it's over the top. But that is 2020, and we just got to accept it, and it's going to go on into 2021. So just get on with it, guys. So now we start talking about you guys and companies. Are you the right CEO for the company? Now, the reason I'm raising this is the key point we get pulled into companies is either pre-A or post-A by the investors. So normally you've got friends and family, seed investors, you bring in the institutional for the A round, and you suddenly got people in the room on the board that are saying, right, they've done well so far, but how are they going to take it from here? How is the business going to go from here? So there is a really serious question that will be raised. So you've probably done a great job. You've got the funding. You've got a small board of probably investors that are around you. You're getting on the radar for the A round with the investor communities that are doing the A round. And if they're keen on investing, this is the question they will pose, because they've got a choice. Either they hire an experienced CEO to come in post A round, or they commit and they support you as the CEO because they see your capability and they build an exec team around you. So with Planet Watchers, they were very technology founders, and we were asked to put in a seasoned CEO to build a SaaS business, a SaaS software business. With ISI, the board always supported Rafael as the founding CEO, albeit he's come straight out of university and he's literally just turned 30. That he's raised 160 odd million, and the board is supporting him. But this will be a key question that your investors will ask of you and your exec team. So I'm not looking for business here. What I'm trying to, I suppose, convey is you need to start prepping yourselves now for that scenario. So to help ensure that you are the CEO of choice. Now that is qualify with if you want to be. Some of you actually may say, let's bring in an experienced CEO at the A round, and I will move to CTO or CSO or some kind of business development type role. You need to be thinking as CEOs, where do I want to be in this company as it moves forward? How much do I want all the stress and hassle of remaining CEO, or actually do I see myself taking another role within the business? So the recommendation I make, and the reason I put that survey out there is get someone early in the room with your business as a mentor, as a non-exec director, or a chair. Now, interestingly, 50% of you don't have a chair. 60% of you have an NED or mentor, but that means a very large number of you do not have someone in the room that can be working with you and developing you. So the whole rationale here is if you've got someone that's walked the road that you are going to walk, they can coach you, they can mentor you, they can challenge your thinking, they can act as a sounding board and help you prepare to be best prepared when it comes to both raising the funding, but post A round, when you suddenly have a more complex board and investors that have done it before and are going to be pretty direct in terms of how they think the business should play out from this point onwards. So they don't need to be on the board, but if you get a chair into the business early or a non-exec director that maybe can become the chair, when you bring in the investors into the business, you've suddenly got someone that's independent and neutral and can bridge between your investors and the demands that they have and you as a founder and your exec team in the business. So this is absolutely imperative, and you can see it as black and white with a lot of companies that do have a chair or a non-exec who's been there, seen it, done it, and those that don't. So if there's one thing I would say from this, if you don't, then get one. And if you do, make sure you're using them and have that conversation with them in terms of, as we prepare for a round, where are the gaps in me as a CEO? And how do I ensure if I want to be the CEO, then I'm going to be the right person to be that CEO post-funding. So there we go. So that's kind of section one, just in terms of your board, the mentoring, and you having that early thought, those early thoughts and that early discussion around what you want to be in your company moving forward. Now, are there any questions around that, or is everyone just going to nod and say, that's right?
I think we have a couple of questions in the chat board. Maybe we
Yeah.
can. We have a couple that are related with your business, actually, and I think one from Jao about the profiler of the CEO.
Yeah, so I just found where the chat button is. It's difficult when you're showing your screen, as Teresa and I were discussing. So, was the pivot from SATs to data analytics before, after, during the funding round? So the early funding rounds for ISI were pre, but Rafal and Pekka, the founders, had already seen the big money was going to be engaging with the customers, but it would need a complete front end build in software analytics in the company, and that was the fundamental driver for the round they've just raised. So it was building that into the plan that actually attracted the investment level, which was 87 million. I think that was a C round into the business. And it now means, as I mentioned before, that they are engaging with governments, with corporations. One of their first go-to-markets is working with a consortium of insurance companies and servicing and giving data that will truly digitalize the insurance sector. So that's kind of a bit more, and I'm happy to have a separate discussion around that as well. If you're targeting early stage startups, what is your business and pricing model? To be honest, it depends what you guys are doing. I'll talk about working with search companies, and maybe I'll come back to that then in terms of our model and what we think you should look for with any search company that you work with. What kind of profile would be a good mentor or coach or CEO? So it doesn't need to be the person that you want to have a beer with. It doesn't need to be someone that's going to be your best friend. It needs to be someone that has got a background and experience and battle scars. You don't want someone that's joined one company and it was the best product and we grew it to 50 million turnover and we sold it and I live on an island. There's no pain in that. You want someone that's done multiple things and they talk as eloquently about the things that went wrong as the things that have gone right. They don't even have to be in space. There's so many technology analogies with the space industry and the model of the space industry. It's about connections. If you've got investors or you're getting involved in incubators, then reach out and find out who are the individuals in that network. And Teresa's brought together a really amazing set of individuals from the space sector as the selection jury. Look at those people, look at their backgrounds, and that may be a great starting point. But also I can give you pointers into ESA. ESA invest a huge amount of money into startups. They've got over 1,000 investments in Europe in space startups and scale-ups. So some of the guys like Nick Appleyard and Jason Maruthian, these are guys that are the front end of putting grants, so funding match grants into startups, and they have a massive ecosystem of people. And again, we can talk about that offline if people want to reach out to me. Teresa, I'm very happy for my contact details to be given out as well at the end of this if people want to follow up.
Perfect.
Okay, good. So let me move the chat over there. Now I know where it is, and that over there. Right, so that's kind of section one. Quick mouthful of tea. Right, section two. So talent management. We as a company always focused on the right-hand side. It was always, what do you need? What are the skills? And we will go find them for you. But what we found over the last, nearly 3 years now, being part of Sheffield Haworth, is that there is a whole story that sits before that. And this is about the individuals that already sit in your business. And it's understanding more what they are rather than who they are, and what are their skills, what are their weaknesses, what are their motivators and their talents, because you may be using 100% of that, or you may just be using a much smaller percentage of that. And this is where we start getting more involved with companies to start understanding, what do you have in the room already, and how do you best use that. So understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the team, understanding the profile of what you're hiring and why, um, and understanding how those potential new hires will fit into the business. It's all very well finding the rock star, but that may not be the right person or the right cultural fit into your organization, and it may actually end up creating more issues or creating issues for you as a company, particularly as a small company. um, so we actually got introduced, and I'm not selling it, we don't make any money on it, but we've actually got introduced to an Estonian startup called TeamScope. It's an assessment tool that assesses your existing team first of all, and it's all online. um, it it then uses the existing team profile to shape the role and the person that you're looking for, and it even gets to the level of providing you key questions that you should pose to candidates when you're interviewing them. But more interestingly, when you get to later stage with those candidates and you assess them, it gives you data in terms of how they will fit and complement that existing team. So this is a data point. It's not a decision maker. But as I pointed out before, I'm an engineer and I never believed in psychometric testing. I'd done so many of these things and I never believed in the outcome that came from them. And with the TeamScope thing, the first thing I did, because I really liked the guys, is I used it on our team within Gillimore Stevens, brought the whole team together and said, right, number one, what do you feel about your profile, and number two, how do you feel about how it's shown the shape of the team in terms of motivators, demotivators, and what would increase the diversity and the skills of the organization. And there was 12 of us that did it from the London office, and only one person who tried to skew it and basically was bounced by their system. Everyone else felt really comfortable with it. So when we done that and realized that it could be useful for us in our own hiring, we started to take it to some of the startups, and with the CEOs, and we started to say, well, look, just assess your existing team because it's good to know. And then as you start to bring executives into your company, you can use it to help that process and to help to get data points to help you with that process. Now, the reason I'm really emphasizing this is if you're trying to hire in a virtual world, you need as many data points as possible because everything you're getting is through a two-dimensional Zoom screen. And you've got to try and dig and get down below the layers to understand as much as you can about the person that's trying to convey themselves through that screen. So using something, whether it's TeamScope or something else, is a really good idea, as we found for our company. We've now used it with 10 startups, hiring execs into the CEO's exec team, and they found it really powerful. And it's interesting, the boards have asked for the data to understand the dynamic of the exec team, and two of the recent boards have actually then profiled themselves to see how they compare with the operational executive team of the company. Now, the great thing about something like TeamScope, and if you're going to do this, is you don't want a 50-page report that you have to interpret. Everything they do is visual. There's commentary, and it makes it really easy to understand. So my recommendation would be is as you start to build, understand what you have in the room, and then understand what you're looking for and how that might fit and complement your existing team. And TeamScope is a great tool, and you can do free trials and things on it as well. But it's we found it as a powerful tool for us, and it can just help give you more data as you try and bring people in. And it can be anything from engineers to executives. It doesn't need to be just at the exec level. So there's a quick summary on them and showing some of the competency tables that they produce there as well. So that's just on that. Now, someone's just, I like the frameworks, questions to ask yourself. What do you have in the room? Are slides going to be available or only video? So yes, we can put the slides out there, and feel free to reach out to TeamScope and just mention Paul Gillespie, Gillimore Stevens, because, well, you may get a discount, but more to the point, you'll get through the noise, and they will respond, and they will talk to you about what they can't do, and they'll be very happy to do a trial and help you understand your team, so you're then prepared for the future when you try and make the hiring. So well worthwhile. Okay, so you've understood what you've got in the room. The next thing is about trying to hire people to complement and build out your team. um, this is where it can go really wrong. You need agreement right from the beginning of, well, who are the stakeholders is the first thing, because we've tried to work with CEOs to hire an exec into the company, and suddenly the board want to get involved at the end of the process and go, no, 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 we don't want that, we want this. And the CEO has to change direction, and a process that has gone on for weeks has to basically wind back. So it's really important that all the stakeholders that you think have a voice on the hire you're trying to make are given that chance to give input into that process at the beginning, because otherwise you're just going to create trouble for yourselves further down the line. And there needs to be an owner for the process. Lots of people may say they want to be involved, but you need someone that's going to be the owner and is going to drive the decision process. Now, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the CEO, but maybe the chair will be involved because maybe the board are insisting on a CFO, for instance, and they've got experience of CFO hiring. But there needs to be an owner that is clearly taking ownership for the process. The other thing is it needs to be an achievable person profile. The number of times I've gone to a startup, and in some cases the board is bigger than the company, and you sit around the table and you get the first view of this is what we're looking for, and then everyone else around the table feels they've got to add something to that profile, and you end up with some godlike profile that is never going to exist, and if they do, they're not going to join your company. So what we end up doing in a lot of cases is saying, these are the essentials and these are the desirables, and you ain't going to get the rest. So it's really important that the stakeholders in outlining what you're looking for, that it's absolutely clear and achievable as a profile. Now, if you're doing it yourself, you need to agree that internally, but you also have to have a very blunt conversation with your recruitment partner, because you don't want them sitting there and just nodding, saying, thank you for the business, yes, we'll go and find them. And again, the time and money are the key things for you guys as businesses. You do not want to get to a process where you hire no one, and you do not want to go down a process where you compromise and hire the wrong person because you've gone through the process and you think that's the right hire. The other key thing is presenting to companies. The number of times that companies have gone free flow in terms of interviews and have come out and just saying after an hour and a half or 2 hours, what a great guy. And you ask the question why, and they go, oh, because he plays squash and he's in the same league as me, or we both go, it's not about the person and their personality fit. And there has to be structure in terms of the conversation, but also you have to present your company in a business-like way so that they can understand you as an organization, and it can't just be around passion to convince someone to come on board. You've got to tell them how it is. You can't let them find issues where they join, and we'll come on to this a bit later. The biggest issue that we have had with execs joining companies, and we nearly had this with the CEO, is the board and the exec saying, we're ready to go to market. And the CEO joined, and in 4 weeks, he's written a report back to the board saying, no, you're not. There's 14 months of work to be done, probably maximum, but we need to build it into the plan before you can go to market. So do not put a ribbon on it, because you then raise this massive risk of it may be you just didn't know, but in a lot of cases it's basically the story and what you're presenting. Actually, you're not that far. Your TRL, for instance, is not that far down the road, and suddenly you've got the trust issue with the person you've hired. But more fundamentally, and we'll come on to this, is there may not be a job for them to do because you don't have a product. You're not ready to go to market. So coming back to what I said earlier is, if you're going to have multiple people interviewing, you've got to have a clear set of assessment criteria, a scorecard, we call it. So what are the 5 areas that are critical for this person? Get them to write comments, not just do 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 2 out of 5. They've got to put clear commentary to why they have scored someone that way, and tell them at the beginning, you're going in there and you've got to fill in all of these scorecard criteria, because there's no point in them going out there and filling in one and saying we got sidetracked, because they're not going to produce the data that you need to help you progress an interview process with a candidate. So the achievable person profile in 3 should directly link to the assessment criteria that you're all using in 6. It's absolutely critical, because 1, it makes the message that the candidate sees from from the interviewers, it puts a structure to that. And secondly, it puts a level of consistency into how they are interviewed. Now, you can still do all the bonding and the discussion and the get to know you, but at the heart of it, you've got to get data that comes out of that interaction. Otherwise, it's just a big waste of time. Now, also, you've got to have a very clear process, and you're all going to go, of course we will, that's madness. But we're working with a German startup at the moment, and they've been interviewing people, and the founders are now interviewing people, and we actually had to just say, stop. You're bouncing these candidates around the founders, the board. Everyone wants to do individual interviews. Some of these guys have had 6 or 7 interviews now, and we need to move this process on to get to a clear structure for decision and making a hire. And it was literally the kind of, the emails were like, oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. We just got so engrossed in talking to all these people. And guess what? When you interview candidates, you guys are going to go through a massive learning curve. It's free consultancy. When you interview people, don't just say, I only want to interview 1 or 2 or 3. Interview 5 or 6, because what you will learn from these candidates that are trying to impress you is worth thousands of pounds of consultancy time, because these are the guys that you would like and you think could be right for your company, but every single one of them could be bringing information, knowledge, or perspective that can help you move your business forward. And don't be afraid to tap into that mine of knowledge when you're interviewing these people. So, clear interview, decision, and offer process. The final thing is whether you're using TeamScope or something else, you're going to be doing referencing, and you've got to be really, really careful with references, because when you're offered references from a candidate, you may think, wow, these look good. But what you've got to make sure is you have a template to the questions you're asking. And I'm very happy to send that around to people. And the first one I ask, and you've got to ask, is what is the context of you knowing this person? How do you know them? And you'll get well, we've worked together for the last 15 years. And then I always say, and are you quite close friends, or is it really just a business relationship? And then you get something that drops onto the table like, no, we're really close friends. We see each other most weekends, and I'm godfather to 3 of their children. And then suddenly you're going to be getting a reference, but it's going to be weighted, because they are not going to be subjective in what you're getting. So even though the references may look right on paper, you've got to understand the context of what the reference is. And if they say something where you think, oh, that's interesting, drill down, go to the next level and drill down, because they may be throwing something out there, and if you grab that hook, they may take you to another level, which is either positive or negative. But you've got to be listening, and you've got to be confident to actually push the referee to take them outside. They're a genius, they're brilliant, and yes, I'd work with them again. Because again, this is really, really valuable data points that you need to have, and that you want to have. And when you bring all of this together, it can be really powerful. Now, just thinking on the fly here, something that isn't in here, but I think is incredibly key, and maybe I should add it actually, is when you're hiring commercial people, sales execs, VP sales, VP biz dev, CMOs, marketing people, you've got to remember that they are salespeople, and they are selling the thing they love best, which is themselves. So you've got to be really, really on your guard in terms of how they sell themselves, how they sell their achievements, because they're going to want to show themselves as being the best. But you've got to drill down through referencing, through interviewing, to really understand what these people are about. And what should be in there as a point is, when you get to final interview, we insist our clients finish the interviews and get the candidate to present back to them. It can be very, very basic, but get them to present back to the board or the exec team um, um, something like, my first year plan in a 3-year context, because you want them to present in a business context how they've understood and assimilated your business, and how they would tackle this role. You want to see them demonstrate that, and you want to see them under robust question and answer to actually prove that they are the person to do this. And hey, guess what? We have seen in so many scenarios that the guy that everyone loved because of the personality and the charisma, he basically copies and pastes some MBA page and basically demonstrates no understanding of the business, goes red and sweats a lot in the Q&A because he thinks he's the best thing, but he's not bothered to really understand the business and really prepare. And you suddenly see the person that maybe the third person, who maybe is a bit quieter, but they demonstrate a really insightful understanding of the business and how your business can move forward. So I will make sure I put this in there for other people. It's too late for you guys, but it's really imperative that you challenge sales and commercial people, because they are the worst to understand and truly understand what you're hiring. You need the data points that come with that. So that's hiring execs in. So yes, Teresa, what I'll do is I can circulate maybe put it into a drive or something, the slide deck, and also I'm happy to put a reference template just as a starting point that people can use themselves.
That would be
References,
great.
final interview, get them to present their first plan.
And I think we have a question from Bram. If you want, we can ask Bram to read it loud.
Oh, it wasn't really a question. It was just as the point wasn't mentioned on the slides, I just thought of typing it out to remember it for myself.
Excellent, thank you, Bram, and for everyone else to remember as well. But as I say, this is absolutely crucial, because a lot of you businesses will be getting that first pilot yourselves, and then you will then be looking to build out the commercial team and start bringing in biz dev or sales or marketing. So it's really, really important you do that. And again, if people want to reach out in terms of different titles, how to position it with candidates, I'm very happy to interact on that and give advice and perspective as well. So we better crack on. So using an executive or any recruitment company, to be honest, because you may well be able to do a lot of this through your network, but at some point you're going to have to use a recruitment company. And if it's executives, you want to use an exec search company. So my first recommendation, and I'm not in any way selling ourselves here, but you got to take references. They will give you, like I did, here are some of our clients. Talk to them, talk to the clients, and make sure they did a good job, they made good hires, and that hires have actually stayed. Just because companies put tombstones on their website or in their proposals, it doesn't mean it was a good project. It doesn't mean it was a good experience. And you want another CEO that's done or doing your journey to say they were good because this is what they did for us and why they were successful. And please make sure it's a company, a search company that understands early stage startups. You're not Oracle, you're not Dell. It's a completely different approach to position and evangelize your company to candidates. So it's really, really important that you work with a search provider that gets it. Understand what their fee structure is. Now, for us, for 20 years, we have always worked to a fixed fee. We do not understand how companies can say we're going to charge you 25% or 30% of comp package, and that means when we're negotiating the salary, we get to buy champagne and pizzas for our team because you're going to have to pay them another 20K and we make more fee. You should be insisting with your search provider that you pre-agree a fee against a midpoint. And that midpoint should be against base salary. Bonuses aren't guaranteed. That you should not be having a fee set against, base salary, bonuses, car allowance, and anything else. The real thing in the room is base salary, and it should be a pre-agreed fee against that amount. And sorry, another thing, the classic process is a third when they start, a third when they present the shortlist. But again, you should insist that you will only agree to the shortlist when you've interviewed the shortlist. Having a pile of CVs in front of you is not a shortlist. These are candidates of interest. It's only a shortlist when you've interviewed them and you agree that these are the right people for you and your business. So the second stage payment should be in your control, and it should be directly linked to them delivering. And the final stage should be against them accepting an offer or starting in the company. And finally, on the comp, agree that there's a no quibble 6-month warranty. It doesn't matter whether you fire them or whether the candidate leaves, the search company should always commit to a 6th month. If they go, we will replace them. Don't settle for anything less. You put someone into Oracle and they disappear into the machine for 15 years. You put a VP biz dev into your company, and there's still going to be risk that they may succeed or fail in the business. So it's really important that that you have that skin in the game from your recruitment partner. And sorry, I thought it was in there. So that's the shortlist bit. The other thing is do not be sold to by someone and then find that you've got someone else delivering the work. Ensure that you've got the person selling to you, listening to your pitch on the company, and they deliver the work as well. Don't let them throw it into a back room and someone that's never interacted with you. And insist on communication. You want to know what the market's saying about your company, who's interested, who isn't. Insist on weekly updates so you know what's going on and where you are in the process, so there's no surprises. So running out of time. So the big issue, if you're
Sorry,
hiring.
Paul.
Yeah.
Ivan here. May I jump
Yes.
in on the last slide with a quick question?
Yeah.
Because you said insist on a 6 months guarantee
Hmm.
because they could leave. So if they left, how does the payment work again?
There isn't any payment. The warranty should be if they leave, we'll replace them on an expense only basis.
For example, from somebody else from the short list we pre-approved.
Yep, someone from the shortlist or having to
Okay.
go back out there. So for instance, I mean, this happens. So we put a guy in Dresden into a company in Munich. He and the family were moving. He accepted the job. He'd been working there 3 months. His family were prepping to move, and then his wife's father had a very major heart attack and was very disabled by the heart attack, and they couldn't move. And you can't commute from Dresden to Munich on a weekly basis. And the candidate, after it was 4 months in the end, just said, look, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to leave. I've got to stay in Dresden because of the family. So that wasn't the candidate, that wasn't the company. It's just, it happens. So we stepped up and we replaced the person free of charge. It was within the warranty period, and we actually managed to find someone from the original shortlist who wasn't interested before, but their company had been sold in the meantime, and they lived in Munich. So we got a local boy in the end for that company, and he's still there after, I think, 4 or 5 years. But That's the kind of thing. It doesn't need to be we don't like him or he doesn't like us. It's just things happen. So it's really worthwhile ensuring and insisting. If you know, if it's 6 months, you know whether it's the right person. Yeah. If it's 3 months, that's really cutting it fine. And anything less than that, you're not going to know. You know, so you really need a recruiter that's putting their commitment and standing by the hire they're making for you as a company.
Clear. Thank you.
So just jumping on, this is really, really critical. And I've just put the whole slide up there for time. If you're making these hires, it's going to take months to find them. They're going to be on 3 months notice, and you get them into the company. You've got to let go. You've got to let the person you hire, you're a CEO, you're doing everything in your business, and that's the way it works. But if you hire someone into these key leadership positions, you've got to let them do the job, because if you don't, they will leave. This is the main reason we see people leaving. We put a CFO into a startup company. The founder was a techie. He was doing all the finance. They raised something like 12 million. The board wanted a CFO, and we found a brilliant CFO who'd been commuting all his life, and this was down the hill on a bicycle for him, and he jumped at the chance. And he was a brilliant guy. He went in there. He left after 4 months, and he just said, I can't do this. He will not let go of just the finance stuff. Everything else he can keep, but I'm not even doing the finance stuff. And the board got exasperated. And in the end, they replaced the CEO because he just would not scale with the company, and he just would not let the key functions go. He wanted to manage everything. So that's an extreme example, but you've got to let them do the job you hired them to do. And you've got to communicate with them and have really frank, stare them in the eyes. Is it working? Are there any issues? And get your recruiter to do it. In the first 6 months, your recruiter should be checking in to see how it's going and feeding back to you any issues or concerns. You've got to have that feedback loop, because otherwise you're going this way and the candidate may go that way. And remember, you know, hired hands have a different mentality to founders. You know, this is everything for you, and you probably have massive equity stakes. Bringing someone in on 1 or 2%, they will be there as a hired hand to do the job and make the company successful, but they're going to have a different mindset to a founder. And you've got to think about that when you bring these people into the business, because they're there on a different basis to you guys, you know, in terms of cash, in terms of equity, and in terms of where they've joined the business as well. So I know we're kind of out of time. Just a really quick few points here before I get by Teresa and she just turns off my video. Look, when you guys are out there presenting your companies, you've got to, you've got to present the team. The number of companies where I review slide decks and this is the best technology ever, and that's great, but investors want to know, you know, who the team is. It adds a depth and a context and a strength to your company presentation. It suddenly makes it a lot more real. And if people start to buy into the team and the caliber of the team, it may be you haven't got the best technology solution, but they start to see the caliber of the organization and what could be done with it. So it's not just a picture and I'm a PhD. It's, you know, exec team, who are they? What is their experience? Who are your board members? Because if experienced guys have joined your board or invested in your company, bang the drum on that. It's really important that these people have done due diligence and they want to be part of your story. If you've got advisors, it's really powerful to say, we've got 2 guys from industry and they may only talk to you once every 6 months, but if they're happy to have their name put against your company, suddenly investors are going to go, well, if he's interested in this company, he's supporting this company, there's got to be something there, either in the team, in the technology, or both. And this, as I say, yeah, adds huge credibility to you guys and what you're doing. Don't just put the pictures, let them understand the team and not just the technology. And to be honest, it only needs to be one slide, but put it in the deck. Even if you're doing a presentation and you're limited on time, show it to them, do a very quick overview of the founders, but let them see who the advisors and everyone is. And if you're sending a deck, that deck's got to talk for itself, just show that there's depth in the people and the team that's there as well. Right, and finally, remember, you've got to have a proposition. Again, this is not just about technology. Customers want to see something that will benefit their business, and they're going to be willing to pay for it. This is absolutely essential. You've got to look from the customer perspective when you're talking about your business and your technology. You know, what problem does it solve? Are clients going to want to buy it? Are they going to see a return on investment? And even talk to potential companies and say, if you had this, what difference could it make to your business? You know, is this something you would want to buy at some point in the future? And being locked down and having LinkedIn, you can reach out to people and just say, could I take 20 minutes of your time and just have that conversation with them? Because you're at the bottom here with the technology looking up, and they are the customer looking down. You got to make sure you're looking at the same things. Otherwise, you're never, you know, going to get off the starting line. And still, I meet companies saying, you know, you've got to see the technology we've made. It's going to change everything. It isn't. Or the thinking that they will come because our technology is so brilliant. They won't. You know, you guys are going to have to work really, really hard to get there. And it's really important that you're doing it from a future customer perspective, not just from the technology. And that is so critical for the businesses. And also, as we talked about with, I mean, iSight didn't pivot because there was anything wrong. They just learned about their customers and realized there was a much bigger revenue opportunity if they went big and went end to end. But we see in so many of our companies that the pivot, you know, a semiconductor company that sells silicon saying we need a software team because our clients want to buy a solution, a stack solution. They don't want to just buy a chip and poke it around and say, what are we going to do with this? This is really, really key for you guys in terms of, you know, keep asking the question. You're a boat tacking in the winds. You're going to be changing and evolving as you go, as you learn, as you interact with partners, with channels, and with customers. Don't be afraid to keep questioning what you are and what you're doing as you get there. There you go, 10 past. I knew I'd be there within the hour, but hopefully, guys, hopefully there's something or some things in there that help you think about more than just get the technology out the door or how do we get the funding. The people dynamic, the boards, hopefully that's been of use.
It has been really, really interesting, actually. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I don't know if we have any question left in the chat. Marco, maybe?
There is one at the beginning. You mentioned, Paul, you would come back to it. Yeah, but maybe you already did it in the presentation. What kind would be a good mentor or a coach or a CEO? Probably mentioned it during the presentation.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, I think I did. So it's accessing, you know, and to be honest, a lot of CEOs I know, they've ended up with a mentor or an advisor just through events, and this is a really difficult time because we should be doing this, you know, in a place and together. You know, we're running with Tech Tour the Deep Tech Summit at the moment. We had 140 odd people on the Deep Tech Summit opening event. And normally that would be a packed room, a few beers, a few canapes, and a huge amount of networking. That can be a great location for finding and meeting people, or just looking at the attendee lists, you know, and saying that guy looks really interesting. Don't be afraid to reach out. don't be afraid to reach out and say, you've got a really interesting profile. This is our business. I'd love to have 10 minutes on the phone with you just to see what you think about what we're doing and to get your view. And if they try and say no, then they're probably not the right person. If they say, of course, I'm happy to give you 10 minutes, and you guys start to talk and get to know each other and then see where it goes. And you may have to kiss a few frogs before you find the right one, because you know, it doesn't need to be as formal as a board position. It can be just getting to know someone and in a informal environment. And post lockdown, it can be, you know, having lunch with them or meeting them for dinner and just talking through, you know, everything that's churning around in your mind with someone that's you know, that's basically got a few, you know, gray hairs or no hair and battle scars.
I see that I think we open a discussion there, because Manuel is asking about considering to allocate some money to build a board, and Timo is so maybe we can open this conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you're
Hi,
go.
great presentation, Paul. I really did enjoy it because you know, you have this deja vu feeling all the time, like I'm going through this, I'm going through this, I'm going through this, you know. So basically, regarding the board, we have been working with several people, some of them more than others or more intense than others. And my question was if you should allocate, you know, a small fraction of shares as a kind of sweat equity for the members of your board, and if so, how much do you think this should be?
Yeah, so I think there's two ways of doing this. If you've got board members, then that's a much more formal engagement. And you know, if you're, say, bringing a chairperson into the business, you know, for as a long-term member of the board, then you're probably going to be talking percentage points to give them as maybe stock options, but also give them the option to buy in. A lot of chairmen will put skin in the game and will buy in to the business as well, which obviously is what you want with someone that's getting involved within the organization. But if you find someone that is a good mentor, advisor, and you're getting value out of it, I would, yeah, absolutely offer, you know, some sweat equity to that individual, because you don't want to be putting, you know, you can buy them dinners, but you don't want to be paying them a daily rate, because that's just but offering someone that recognizes where you are and using your equity to as a, you know, as a thank you or a platform for a longer term engagement with them, that's exactly how it works.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, I don't see more questions into the chat, only people happy about the presentation you gave, Paul. It's really great.
Okay, brilliant. Well, sorry for overrunning, but I do go on a bit. I'm really happy, you know, to just be out there for you guys. So if you know, Teresa can circulate the reference sheet, the slide deck, and my contact details, and if there's stuff we can do for you guys, you know, there's no fee. Just very happy to help and give a perspective. And it doesn't mean what I'm saying is right or definitive, but the more data points you get as you make decisions and do things, the better it's going to be for your organization. Sorry, Ivan. Yes, you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. It came to me while listening to your presentation, somewhere halfway in. So the title was number 1 reasons to invest, team. Number 1 reasons to not invest, team. And I'm wondering about the link, because organizations such as yourself come into play when there's money to be handed out, right? You know, there is either a big Series A coming up, or some government said we want to invest in your satellites or buy your product 3 years down the line. You know, it's always a future thing, but you know, either there's no money, or I guess I'm looking for, have you seen the unsuccessful examples, the battle scars where they lost, when the team was actually a determining reason to not get an investment?
To be honest, because we normally get involved when the investment is being considered or made, then we don't normally see the ones that fail. This is more anecdotal from VCs where they felt they cannot get on with, and a lot of that is about the chemistry and relationship. Or there's a hugely, inflated set of egos, and that translates into a valuation that doesn't make sense as well. But I think it's more interesting at the other end of the spectrum is if the investors buy into you guys as a team, they'll be more open about where you may have got to technically, because they know that you guys are on a journey, and they will buy into you guys as CEOs and the team around you with your ability to go through that journey successfully. So yeah, so individuals can switch off investors, and it just doesn't happen. But equally, the team is really, really key. You can have the best technology and an awful team, and you won't get money. You can have the best team, and the technology is not quite baked yet, and you can still attract investment into the company. And a great example. There's this incredibly strong. He's an Iranian guy who went to work with Samsung in a secret lab. He's now come to the UK building a photonics company, and he went through the incubator Entrepreneur First. And Entrepreneur First don't look for technology, they look for people. And he basically developed his proposition with Entrepreneur First, and he attracted Octopus Ventures as a seed investor. And they don't do seed investments, but they've believed in what he's doing in photonics, and the story, because it's just a story at the moment. And they stepped up and put money in that because they wanted to back him as an individual. Now, they're the extremes. Most companies and people are in the middle here, but the investors will make decisions on both technology, the opportunity, but absolutely the people and the caliber of those people and the personalities of those people as well.
Right.
Paul, I have a last question before we just go, since you are so kind. Similar to the board, in the case of the founding members of the team, means they are not shareholders, but they have been working on the idea or working on the project since its origins. Like, for example, we had a team of more or less 10 people. Out of these 10 people, we have like a core team, which is like the 2 co-founders, and then we have 2 other ones that have been always from the origins since like 3 years. And we thought that as a good practice, to and in order to motivate it to get engaged on the company and stay in the company for longer, or at least for a period of, to put some part of the shares, or allocate some part of the shares, as a kind of management incentive program, whatever. Do you have any process to do that, or would you recommend me any kind of like criteria or methodology to enter into this discussion? Because, okay, we say, for example, I'll give you a pretty good example. We said, okay, let's take 1% of the company, and we have a team member of 4 people, and see 0.25. But if the company is going to be evaluated on, let's say, 1 billion or 100 million, it's definitely too much, you will see. So how do we assess what's the right sort of, in the terms of the employees that have been, loyal to the company and in the founding team from the first time?
Yeah.
Sorry for the long question.
No, absolutely. And I would probably say 8 or 9 times out of 10, companies will create an employee stock option program, an ESOP. And this is where you ring fence a percentage of the equity at each of the funding rounds for use in hiring and for use in incentivizing your employees. And a lot of companies now, they negotiate with their institutional investors that there is, just one class of stock. The historic of preference shares and ×2 return, and double dipping in terms of we get our preferences back and then we get another slice of what's left over. It's a lot more pragmatic now. So yes, you should have an employee stock option program. If you give someone 0.25 now, you've got to remember that that will get diluted every time you get investors coming in, albeit the valuation will go up. But my recommendation would be, and it was on one of the slides and I didn't call it out as a bullet point, but getting a part-time HR person and finance person for any company. You don't need to have them long-term, but at the very least, get an HR person to do a 2-day, what do we need, how do we do it, and how do we implement it? Because so many companies grow and grow successfully and nearly come off the rails because they've got no HR structure, process, benefits. The employee stock option program hasn't been implemented correctly. Some people are leaving because they're not part of it, and others are, and there's Chinese whispers. So it's really important, as with all parts of the business, is get a part-time, and there's loads of CFOs that just do plural work, and the same with HR people. You'll be able to find them locally, and you can get them to do a couple of days just to put in the foundations for for finance, for HR, and also an employee stock option scheme. But when you get investment from an institutional, that should be part of the playbook. Part of the investment round will be, all of the normal things, and we will create, or we will ring fence X% for employees and future hires into the business.
Great. Thank you a lot for that one, because it's one of the questions that has been like, it's very difficult, to know how to assess how much, etc. Employee stock options, and this is, and I don't know if the other founders share the same feeling with me, but this is always this question, when you know that it's coming, that you are potentially close to raise the investment you're looking for, you see, and you know that when that comes, you really need to deploy and increase your team, etc. So you never know how to plan the things or how to scale up. So your investment readiness is going to be as high as possible when the money comes, and then eventually, to grow. But thanks a lot.
Yeah, and to be honest, if you get a few hours or a couple of days from a part-time CFO who knows about startups, and we've got them all over the place here in the UK. I'm sure you can find them local to yourself. They will have a playbook they open and say, these are the 10 things you need to do as a startup. And you can either use that person to implement them, but at least you know what those 10 things are. And that's going to include, share option schemes. It's also going to be about ensuring that you walk into an investment round, and obviously this is a different conversation for a different thing, but not getting, done over, as we say, by the investors, because it will be hard negotiation that you need to go through there to ensure that it's viable for you and for all your employees in terms of everyone being able to make money.
Thank you a lot, Paul. Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Paul, do you mind having a last question? Because we have a last question in the chat from Ahmad. So
yeah, what's your question, Ahmed?
It was this one.
No.
About considering early team and giving them. Oh, I see. Yeah. So considering early team members and giving them a bigger role as the company progresses. Yeah, absolutely. So we see that happen. We also see, I mean, I'm working with a company at the moment, and one of the founders is VP marketing, but everyone else in the exec team who are also founders are saying, he's run out of runway. He's not able to take us to the next level. So I think, you know, understanding what you're going to ask of someone in a broader or more senior role, using something like Team Scope, taking them through an interview structure, maybe, you know, having a part-time HR person to give you structures and formats and processes for assessing the team, whether it's Team Scope or something else, to help you go through a formal process. But there's no reason that individuals can't grow with the company and maintain senior roles in the business, but you may well get to a point where they just don't know what they don't know in what you're asking them to do.
One last question.
Yeah.
Last question.
We have a question from Marco. If Marco will
yeah.
it.
So it's just a quick question. So how would you say you can decide if it's better to grow fast and burn a lot of cash, or perhaps grow slower and have a longer runway, considering that obviously we are in an early stage startup context with revenues which are still to come, or anyway very slow? What would you suggest?
To be honest, I'd love to be able to answer that question, because I would make a hell of a lot of money if I could. I mean, Marco, what it boils down to is, you know, every company is different, even if it looks the same in terms of what they're trying to do as a SaaS software play or an analytics play or an antenna design house. You know, there will always be similarities, but there's always going to be big differences. And this really loops back to the mentor, the advisor sounding board, you know, someone that's from industry that you can be over a dinner and a nice glass of wine exactly asking these questions and bouncing your rationale off them and getting their insight and perspective. And it doesn't need to be one person. Maybe you grab two people and do the same with them and collate the data and decide what you want to do. But reach out to people. Don't be afraid. Engage with people, and don't use them, because if you're going to buy them a nice dinner, they're going to be up for it. I would. But then if they get more actively involved, we talked about using sweat equity to get them focused, you know, on ensuring it's not just giving advice, it's focused on the success of the business, because they have a shareholding in that business.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Fantastic. I would like just to remind everybody, and also Paul, that we can share your contact and the slide deck and the recording, but as well, everybody will be available to book one-to-one meetings using the community at the e-pitching sessions on 15 and 16 of December. It's a pretty easy functionality that you can use through our community, and you will be watching a recording. We will send a recording on how to use this functionality.
Yeah, sorry, it's going to be a long recording.
No, not in this one. It's like a 5 minutes recording on how to take a one-to-one meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Brilliant. Look, guys, thank you. If it's not interactive, it's pointless. And you guys have been great with your questions. And yeah, absolutely. One-to-ones, very happy. And I'll certainly be around for those. And look forward to you guys progressing to that next stage. And I can sit quietly drinking tea and eating biscuits while you guys do the hard work presenting to the juries. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for your time, Paul. It was great. Thank you.
Paul.
Brilliant. Have a good day. Have a good evening.